Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, restrictions are brought in for the main city in Ethiopia's Amhara region. It's seen a wave of violent civil unrest over the government's efforts to dissolve state security forces. Also, as more European countries like Italy crack down on both migration and humanitarian rescue operations at sea, the number of attempted crossings from coastal cities like Sfax in Tunisia are up year on year, our correspondent reports. And the countdown starts to Kenya's first operational satellite. The landmark liftoff for the country's space program will see the Taifa 1, or One Nation in Swahili, launch from a space force base in California. But first, at least 2 people have been killed in Ethiopia's Amhara region amidst protests against the government's efforts to break up regional special forces and fold them into federal forces. Now, the Catholic Relief Services says that 2 of its workers were shot dead in the town of Kobo on Sunday. Restrictions have also been brought in for the regional capital of Gondar, banning certain motorised scooters used for public transport, shutting clubs and bars by 9 p.m, banning the carrying of weapons, and requiring permits for public meetings. Now, Amhara's regional forces supported the federal army in the 2-year Tigray war, but were accused of rights abuses. A peace deal ended that conflict last November. Cisse Salu brings us more from Addis. Cisse, so talk us through, why has there been quite such a violent backlash in Amhara against the plans to dismantle its special forces?
Thank you. The plan of to dismantle the special forces is it's a long overdue process. But the problem what's happening now is it's because government has coming with an abrupt decision to dismantle these forces. But when it happens without any detailed consultation, the Amhara regional state, especially the youngsters, have started to protest mainly because the decision of government, they fear that the decision of government might leave or expose them to another form of attack, either from the neighboring Tigray or Oromia region. And the other fear is that these Amhara regional protesters are saying that these special forces have been fighting along with the federal government during the Northern Ethiopia war, and they seek a bold recognition. But the federal government hasn't done like that, as the protesters are saying. So this is the second reason. And the other reason is the Amhara protesters are seeking, they are not sure about the Pretoria Agreement, the Pretoria Agreement that was signed between the federal government and the TPLF force, the Tigray Liberation Front, that was signed in Pretoria, South Africa. And the protesters are saying the agreement is not done well as per the agreement. They are saying like this.
Right, so it sounds like there's a lot of skepticism from some quarters in Amhara about how that agreement that was signed in Pretoria between the Ethiopian government and the TPLF, how likely it is to hold, particularly in light of Amhara's own interests. So what next? What will it take for the Amharans currently protesting to accept the government's plans? What kind of assurances will they be looking for?
Indeed, as I said, I would say that the public, if the public was consulted, this issue wouldn't happen like this. The thing might be changed. Instead of aggravating, it would be changed into better. But even after the start of this protest, words coming from the politicians are not good. Some of the words are aggravating the situation. So the next thing should be, there has to be a consultation with the public, a discussion with the protesters, how things has to be done, because the decision coming from government was abrupt and sudden. Despite it was necessary to dismantle this force and form one centralized government, the decision was a sudden, and the Amhara forces are they fear another form of attack might come, and there is a claim, a territorial claim between Amhara and Tigray regional state. So it's not solved. So there is a fear that another form of attack might come. So the protesters are seeking, like, make sure the federal government do its job with TPLF and to solve this territorial claim, like the Walqait area and Raya Qobo area, which is claimed by both Tigray and Amhara. The other thing is, despite the federal government is saying TPLF is doing its job to disarm its military equipment, and it's the way what was happened before. I mean, during the war, it has encompassed many military apparatus. So the Amhara protesters are seeking, like, a security guarantee. What will happen tomorrow, since the situation is not well stable now? The protesters are, like, requesting the federal government a guarantee that another form of attack might not come. If another form of attack is coming, they seek like a guarantee either from Tigray or another form of attack, like from Oromia region. So it's like the people are seeking safety and security issues. They are raising this issue.
Thank you. Cisse Salu there speaking to us from Addis Ababa. Now, at least 2 people have died and about 20 others are missing after a boat travelled clandestinely from Tunisia to Italy and sank in the Mediterranean Sea. Meanwhile, Italy's Coast Guard says that it spent Monday trying to rescue 800 migrants on a ship about 200 kilometres off the coast of Syracuse. Rome says that more than 28,000 migrants have already arrived in Italy since the start of the year, almost 4 times more than over the period last year. The UN reckons that the number of boats trying to make it over from Tunisia is up by 226%. Our correspondents report.
The Tunisian Coast Guard tracks migrant boats at sea 24 hours a day to intercept the informal crossings. These migrants are refusing to leave their boats. This particular night, 9 boats each with about 30 people are arrested. These are record numbers, and the high season hasn't even begun yet. In the early morning, we come across a boat of Tunisians, one of whom also brought their child with them and agreed to talk with us.
I brought my daughter and family because of the living conditions back home. How long can we keep up with rent? We can't build a house. Day and night I run around working so we can eat. It's my 3rd attempt at a crossing, and I'll try again, hopefully.
The number of migrants from Tunisia and other African countries is rising. President Kais Saied's anti-migrant speech in February sparked violence against black workers, and many were kicked out of their homes and jobs and now feel a sea crossing is the only way out. In Sfax, we meet Elki from Ivory Coast, who survived a shipwreck in March.
My husband lost his job. That's why, with the little money we had, we used it to leave.
Elki lost her son and husband in the wreck. Still in shock, she doesn't know what to do next.
If I go back now, I have nothing to give my family. They'll say, you did 6 years here and you have nothing to send back home. What can I say?
Tunisian authorities are struggling to stop the flow of people towards Italy.
With the current economic crisis and state of public finances, Tunisia can't manage the migration issue. You can see already everything depends on civil society groups. It's these organizations that provide food, diapers, and milk. Unfortunately, in Sfax, we don't even have a center to temporarily place arrested migrants.
At the port of Sfax, we find a National Guard boat that arrested close to 300 migrants in one night. Once they arrive at port, they are all released. Several of them are likely to try to make the crossing again as soon as they are able.
The UK stopped actively recruiting health and social care workers from Nigeria. Now, it's been placed on a red list along with 53 other nations, most of which are African, where there are shortfalls in skilled personnel in the healthcare sector. Brain drain and international recruitment can leave these countries even less well supplied with crucial workers. Recruitment to the UK can still happen when there is a government-to-government agreement, and the British government stressed that individuals aren't prevented from independently applying for jobs and said that restrictions don't apply to healthcare workers, regardless of their nationality, if they do not live in a red list country. And Kenya will soon join the growing list of African nations with their own satellites in orbit. At least 13 countries have manufactured satellites so far, and Kenya's Taifa 1 will be launched aboard a SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket from a base in California on Monday night. Kenya said the landmark achievement will deliver much needed sovereignty on key data that has a direct impact on food security. Wasim Korne brings us more from California.
We are just a few hours away from a big moment for Kenya's space program. Taifa 1, or Nation 1 in Swahili, will be launched from the Vandenberg Space Force Base here in California. It's the first time the country is launching its own satellite, entirely designed and developed by Kenyan engineers. It's a project 2 years in the making. The price tag, 50 million Kenyan shillings. That's a little under $400,000. This is an observation satellite. It will be used to collect very important data on agriculture and food security. You may be aware that Kenya is in the midst of its worst drought in 40 years. Now, satellites like Taifa 1 can help authorities and farmers determine how much water crops are consuming. That means they can distribute water better, and of course that helps with conservation. Now, Kenya has been able to do that in the past, but always relying on third-party data, and that of course costs a lot of money. So this launch will give the country full sovereignty. Now, it also means that Kenya will join 13 other African nations who have their own satellite, but the country won't be able to use these images just yet. There is a ground station to process these satellite images that is currently being built on the northern outskirts of Nairobi. It should be ready by July.
And staying with Kenya, it is emerging as a regional leader in the continent's booming tech sector. It's recently become the first country on the continent to make coding part of its primary and secondary school curriculum. It's a forward-thinking commitment to shaping the next generation of programmers and engineers and to foster further innovation. Berstecker has the story.
Inside Nairobi's sprawling Kibera slum, these primary school students are headed to class with a skip in their step. They're 11 or 12 years old and are already learning how to code.
We are going to continue from where we left.
In today's lesson, pupils must create a short animated clip featuring their favorite animal. A fun and playful introduction to programming with an eye on their future careers.
We are introducing them to this. It's because the world is moving to a digital place, So if they get these skills at a very young age, it gives them a chance to be like lifelong learners. I think coding can be their future.
Inspired by these lessons, young Joanne is already dreaming of working in the digital sector.
I would like to have a job like creating cartoons, stories, and creating games.
Kenya recently became the first African country to include coding in its primary and secondary education curriculums. A move that could help cement the country's leadership in the booming information and communications technologies sector. Nairobi is already considered one of Africa's major tech hubs, earning it the nickname Savannah Valley. In recent years, new co-working spaces have sprung up like mushrooms across the capital, reflecting a growing global demand for young tech-savvy Kenyans.
11 Python engineers from Kenya are moving to Sweden. In fact, they're moving this month. And we have some of the greatest skill sets here. This proves it.
The goal isn't only to send workers abroad, but also to bring big tech closer to home. The likes of Google and Microsoft already opened offices in Nairobi, and Kenya hopes more will soon follow suit.
Well, that's it for Eye on Africa. Thanks for joining us. Do so again. Take care.